Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the messy middle of being out on your own and starting over with the people who've done it. I'm your host, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into today's story of starting over. Welcome to today's pod episode, my friend. I hope you're keeping well and taking good care of yourself. And can I just say a huge thank you to you for choosing to hit play today. It means the bloody world to have your ears for this next 45 minutes or so. I was super excited to get this chat in with today's guest because every time I learned a little more about her, I was getting more and more hooked on her story. She's made way more than one major life change and career change and has so much insight to share on why trusting your instinct is so important. It's full of little hints and tips that may very well end up stuck to a post-it note on the mirror if you're that way inclined. Personally, I love a post-it note, especially when you color code them based on what you want them to say. I love it. Anyway, here is the fabulous Melissa Hobbs. Strap in for this one because today's guest is a woman who does not shy away from inspiring reinvention. She's the incredible multi-hyphenate Melissa Hobbs. Mel has dedicated her time to making the world a better place for animals, co-founding Meat Free Week, which you may have heard of before, then launching the Vegan Company, a no-judgement zone that connected people with the ever-growing collection of plant-based inspiration and information. She's on the board of the not-for-profit Till the Cows Come Home, which rescues, rehabilitates and rehomes unwanted farm animals. And it's where she adopted her glorious pet pig, George. But wait, there is actually still more. After leaving the bustling streets of Sydney for the serenity of coastal country living in northern New South Wales, she's taken an active role in the business she co-founded over 20 years ago, eFragrance, a beauty supplier to Australia's leading corporate rewards programs. And she's now preparing to open the doors of the Lazy Prospector, a name I'm absolutely obsessed with. Her stunning cozy cabin tucked in Tasmania's rugged west coast, and it's getting very exciting to see that open its doors. Melissa Hobbs, wow, am I pumped to get stuck into your story today. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure. We eventually had to hit record on this podcast because we had already chatted for like half an hour. But I feel like I could chat to you for a very long time. We've got a lot to cover today and I can't wait to get into it because reading about you, researching you, it's just very inspirational. So I'm excited to get into it. But before we do, I've got a little icebreaker start-off question for us. I would love to know, how do you think George, your pet pig, would describe you?
As the food source. He's like a dog. He's there waiting, and he would probably describe me as reliably unreliable. So I mix up his no, I've read this because they're very intelligent pigs, and one of the things is to actually mix up some of their feeding times so that they don't get too stuck in a routine and then they get annoyed and then they can, when I say not speak to you, obviously that sounds a bit weird, but you get the full range of emotions. They're very vocal. So, but I also think, and this is going to sound a bit weird, but he and I just have this from the time we met when we were doing the rescue with him, just this really, I've wanted a pig like pretty much my whole life. And when I saw him, he came up with a charity, and the charity, I'm on the board, they've spoken to me, and I just went, that's my pig. That's my pig. And I'll keep it short, but sorry, my daughter and I drove up to Queensland. He was being sold for meat at a produce store. One of the men there used to share his lunch with him every day and had contacted the charity. He'd gone to a foster carer. So it took 9 of us 4.5 hours to load him. And then when we were driving back, my daughter, who was with me, so we had this giant pig on the back of this trailer. I'd never driven a trailer before. It was so crazy. And so the only thing that was open on the freeway was McDonald's. Obviously, I don't usually go to McDonald's, but my daughter was like, I can get like a vegetarian burger, or they do vegetarian things or something. But because it was not the standard meal, we had to pull over, but I didn't know how to pull over with the trailer, and I blocked the McDonald's car park. Like, it was like, it was this crazy, like, you know, when you just can't, I couldn't. She was like, Mum, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, they're just going to have to wait until they bring out your vegetarian, whatever it is. This is the irony of sitting in McDonald's with this giant pig on the back. They probably thought I was doing some like animal activism protest. But anyway, I think he's very happy. He's living his best pig life, is what I say about George.
Oh, I love that. George just sounds like heaven. That sounds like the best adventure. And I love your point about mixing up his routine so he doesn't get too stuck. Like, there's something that I could learn from that, you know, when we get into our routines and, you know, just mixing it up and having different foods, different times of the day. I love that. I kind of wish I was George. But take me back to a little earlier, Mel. So before George came into your life, before all of those incredible things that you've done in the meat-free industry, in all of the things that you're about to do, who were you before the bio?
Okay, so I did a primary school teaching degree, and when I did that degree, probably about halfway through, I knew that I probably didn't really want to be a primary school teacher, but I loved the degree. And I will still say to anybody, if they're unsure of what degree to do, that is an awesome degree, because it just gives you this just rounding in all these different subjects. Yeah. And then once I finished the degree, I moved to Sydney and worked in the promotions department of, it was called Grace Brothers back then, but it's now Myer. And that was really fun, like lots and lots of fun. And then from there, they had an art gallery. And then I was sort of, I suppose, poached, maybe the word they'd use, poached, asked to go and work in the art gallery. So I worked there, and I loved both of those jobs. Like, I was young and, you know, out of uni, and it was fun. Like, you know, they were really, really fun days, lots of energy. And from there, I was put in, because none of this is on my bio. So from there, I was put in to head up, because it's so long ago. Who wants to know what happened all those years ago?
I do.
From there, I was put in to head up what was called, I think it's still around, the corporate services division. So, and I led a team there. And interestingly enough, doing that work was what led me to introduce the corporate gifting side of eFragrance, which is the company we founded 20 years ago, which I didn't work in for the first decade, but I had the idea back then that there was an opportunity that we could be supplying fragrance into corporate programs, and that came from that Grace Brothers job. And then I was at a dinner party with some friends, as you said, dinner parties back in the 90s, and someone said to me, my friend, who was actually like on Marie Claire, she went, "Oh, you'd be so great in magazines. Gosh, you'd be good in magazines." And I was like, "Oh, that sounds great."
I love that.
And so I went for an interview on a magazine called New Woman. It's not around now, but it was published by Murdoch Magazines, and got the job as an account manager on the sales side. And honestly, they were probably like working at Murdoch Magazines, and then what started a very, you know, probably I'd say pretty successful, pretty big career in magazines. They were honestly I look back now, and I think I've got my best years ahead of me, but those years were so fun. And a lot of the women, and men actually too, but, you know, it's largely dominated by women, magazine publishing, and just so many of my closest friends are the people that we all knocked around with years and years ago. So it was very much kind of quite cliquey and quite clubby. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun. So from there, I sort of worked my way up, I suppose, within magazines. I was the national ad manager on Vogue and GQ for a while, on Delicious. I worked on Elle. Then I sort of wanted to step away, and I did do a little bit of a stint in eFragrance at the time, so in its early days, and that's when I got the corporate side of it set up. And then I was, again, to use the word poached, I was asked to come back into mags, and I worked as a launch strategist on a magazine called Notebook, which I don't think is around anymore either, sadly, but it was sort of big in its time. And then I was, from there, so I'm just trying to keep it short, then I worked, this is I think when my bio kicked in, or my LinkedIn kicks in. So then I was put in as a commercial strategist, and actually when I'm in Tasmania next year, I'm staying with the woman that actually put me into that role. And I loved that role. It was, I just had my daughter Lotus, and it was a 3-day-a-week role. It was working across all the magazines with the editorial and sales teams and helping them do their strategy. So that was with news. So some really amazing titles. And then I was promoted actually during the GFC. Just goes to show how old I am.
No.
And I was like, I had some fancy title, the commercial director of key accounts and strategic response. And so I had a big team, I had a big budget, and I didn't really want the role. Like it was a restructure and I was promoted. I just had my second daughter, Clover. She was probably 6 months old. And I remember saying to my husband at the time, I'm not 100% sure that I want this. I really loved my commercial strategist role that was 3 days a week. And it was a 4 day a week. I negotiated a 4 day a week job. But I just went into it thinking, I just don't, we've all got that little voice sometimes that is, and it's wonderful, but you've also got to sometimes think about who you are and your constitution. And I'm just someone that is naturally a bit stressed, or, my grandmother would say highly strung.
Relatable.
So much now living up here with George and the family. But back then in publishing, it was quite stressful. And at a certain point, I kind of went, I'm going to give it 18 months and then I'll know. And I sort of knew quite quickly. And then this probably feeds into where you and I got talking about, your podcast. Mm-hmm. And that was when I said to my husband at the time, you know what, I want to move. I want to move to the country. And we had this really kind of quite cool, quite hip city life in Newtown with the publishing set. And he was like, oh, yeah, no, I quite like our life. And I'm like, yeah, okay, look, I'm going to move. So either you come with me, like I'm going. Like I don't want to do this, and I need to move far enough away that I don't get enticed, because that's what always happened. I had sort of, occasionally left, like when I left Vogue and then I got called back, and when I left New Woman and then I got called back. So he at the time said, okay, well, I was thinking we'd move to the Southern Highlands of New South Wales, but he was like, well, if we're going to move, I want it to be somewhere that's interesting, and Byron's the only place that, offers that. And so we did. We didn't tell anybody, and it was funny at that time because I'm such an oversharer. It's like, oh, shut up, Melissa. Give me back that talking stick. But
do not shut up. I love
it. But it was very much a case of, okay, let's just, the minute he said, okay, yep, we can do this, honestly, I was like a woman possessed. I had got 9 properties for us to look at. I booked flights. We were up for the weekend. I had the kids at the grandparents, just didn't say anything to anybody. It was like, oh, we're just going for a couple's weekend in Byron. Anyway, so found a property. And I remember my husband, we're now divorced actually, but we still run the business together. But he was having his gallbladder out and I was really sick. And I'm there on the phone doing the deal with the real estate agent to move. And anyway, it was actually a crazy time. But to go back to the whole point of this podcast, now I look back, and I wouldn't say it was a midlife crisis necessarily, but it definitely was that thing of going, you're looking around, and I think a lot of people see this or feel this but don't know how to get out of it. Mm-hmm. And, you look around and it's like, oh, I'm climbing to the top of that rat pile, and then you get to the top of the rat pile. So I was in a big job and then very well paid, and then you look around and you're like, oh my goodness, there's even a bigger rat pile over there. And it just felt that everybody was on this treadmill, myself included. I had a nanny for the kids. We were very social and we had a lovely life, but I regularly thought, and I don't think this anymore, but I regularly used to think, gosh, is this it? Like, is this it? So we moved. And I suddenly went from having kind of like a lovely entertaining budget and wearing really great clothes to, quite honestly, packing boxes in a warehouse. Which was, that was challenging, because I think for most people, a lot of our identity, particularly in the corporate world, or if we have a job that's seen as prestigious or desirable, I'm sure in an academic sense it happens as well, but we do attach a lot of who we are to what we do. And you've only got to go to a party and one of the first questions people will always say is, oh, so what do you do? So we really do get attached, I think, and we like to do it because we like to pigeonhole people or understand. And I'm hoping that in the years ahead, as we become as more multi-dimensional, or we have these, it's not like the 1950s where you got a job and you ended up in the corner office, you retired, you died. So I think, sorry about my dog, sorry, I'm now I can hear her snoring. So.
Oh, it's beautiful. I've got a pug, and she could snore the house down from 3 rooms away. So I totally understand. And I love everything that you're sharing with this. You and I have spoken at length about how our journeys are quite similar. So I really understand what you're saying when you talk about the almost addictive nature of the adrenaline and the stress and the deadlines and the fabulous people you get to meet, the fabulous brands you get to work with. It is incredibly attractive. And when those little niggles start to come in about, wow, this is everything that I think I want and that most people probably want, and I'm not feeling great about it, that can be pretty confronting to look at. And I'm curious, what did those little inklings look and feel like for you?
So I mentioned before about being someone that's quite, highly stressed. And so I just felt, I remember actually this was well before I left, but it's actually when I left Vogue. And I remember, I can't believe I'm even going to share this, but actually begging my husband. I was at home, I was crying, and I thought I was dying. I actually thought I was having a heart attack, and I was begging my husband to take me to the hospital. So I wasn't having a heart attack. I was having a panic attack.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And, I think that in some of those instances, and again, the people you work with are beautiful, they're supportive. And like I said, I still have like the most incredible network of friends from those days, but it doesn't change the expectation of that role. And you can have all the support there, but if your makeup or constitution is not necessarily suited to it. And so I think for me, I started, and I had incredible support and wonderful management and wonderful teams that reported into me as well. So you hear some horror stories, but I didn't ever have those experiences. I had nothing but amazing support and worked with amazing people. So I think for me, it was starting to realize that what you just said, actually, gosh, I do have all of this available to me, and yet I'm still not happy. There's something missing, or I'm not being true to myself. And it is exactly what you said, it is quite confronting. And I do remember when I moved to, so I moved to Mullumbimby, actually, which is in the hinterland of Byron. And I had a girlfriend of mine who was the editor of one of the magazines I'd worked on, and she'd moved back to the UK, but we were walking on the beach in Byron. And I was saying to her, gosh, what if I've made this big move and I'm never going to do anything again? Like I'm packing boxes for e-fragrance and is this my life? Like, have I just left that for this? What was I so you have those moments of what was I thinking? Like if I had a break, like really? Yeah. And she was like, look, that's just not you. Like, you actually need to probably get some time out and you need to take the time out. And that was really great advice. And it's advice I've had, which came later actually in 2020. And I think that we get really afraid. And again, it's this treadmill thing or this mentality of busy, 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 busy. Yes. And look, sadly, I'm still, as you know, because we've had to reschedule this podcast a couple of times because I'm so busy. So you do take who you are with you. Like I moved up here to escape that busy life, and then I find that my busy self just shows up still and kind of ruins everything. So
relatable. Yeah, it's very relatable. I live in a town of 600 people. 50 meters from the beach. It sounds like it should be the most peaceful, calm life, but somehow I have from 6 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. in the evening completely booked, and I'm still working at night and still messing around with something. I do understand, and I think is such an interesting parallel. You talk about your constitution not necessarily fitting the job in terms of how it feels and how you feel through it. But then in the same hand, it almost does. It's a real push-pull, I find, between the two. And that advice of, taking time, I love it when people say that. But I completely ignore it. I don't know if you're the same. Yeah, cool. That's great. But I'd like to launch a podcast in the next month. I'd like to write a book by February. I'd like to good chat.
And I think there's something about personality types that just do that. And it's also funny and this is not meant to sound egotistical at all, but I was really good at what I did. Like I was really, really good at it in publishing. Yeah. And so I think that was the other thing when you're really good at something, but there's this juxtaposition between or an irony, or it's like you've got people saying, "Oh, you're so great," and wanting to promote you and wanting to grow you, and and you just going, gosh, I just don't like this, but you're really good at it. So it is, totally. I do hear you about, taking the time. It's so much easier said than done. There's a great book on essentialism, which is really about identifying. I haven't applied any of it, but I'm going to go back and read it. It's so good. But it is about identifying, really, because it's that whole 20-80 rule, and we just get caught up. And if we could just go, right, we're just going to focus on that 20% of, where we're going, and just actually leave the 80% of all the stuff that we're doing that keeps us busy, but actually keeps us away from what we're really wanting to do. And you can't do it all at once. I think I say that, and I like you, I try.
And look, there's a lot to celebrate in being insatiably curious about your own ideas and your own potential as well. There's, I think, when you work in a job that pushes you to your nth degree when it comes to deadlines, when it comes to what you can take on, you do see a potential in yourself about how much you can achieve under such pressure. And that's a very hard thing to give away. I, feel that in my day, I'm like, yeah, great. But if I do this now, then in an hour's time, I can do this. I can multitask by doing this at the same time. And it is something that you get used to. And, I think not necessarily batting down one side or the other, but living in that middle where you can push and you can push yourself and you can grow and you can try new things and do new things. It's really cool. It's, it's something we don't maybe talk about often enough. There seems to be this time, I think it's kind of eased off now, but there's this time particularly in Instagram world where hustle culture was being absolutely demonized, like no hustle, slow down completely, stop, cancel out the hustle culture. Whereas I felt looking at that going like, well, why can't I like hustling? I like getting stuff done. Like, yeah, I'm a yoga teacher, but I also like to hustle. So, hopefully now that's starting to come around.
It's funny because I'm the same actually. And I've just got this theory, and you probably know more about it from yoga, so I probably have no idea what I'm talking about. But what I know is that low energy for me, when I'm not hustling or when I'm not thinking or creating or dreaming or doing, low energy, then it seems to stick. Like, I kind of get slower, but not necessarily in a good way. Whereas when I'm busy, and not that kind of awful busy, but I've got stuff to do and I'm in the flow or excited about it, then I don't know, it seems to, and it is that weird thing where the synchronicity of it, where you then start to attract what you need, and you attract different people, and you have another, it is like the weirdest thing. And I've got this theory, actually it has been proven by science, but I embarrassingly drive a yellow car, and it wasn't by choice. My husband really wanted this yellow car, and honestly, I'd never really even noticed yellow cars other than the girls going, what do they call it? There's a thing that they, oh no, what do they say? They go Pogo or something. It's some weird thing that they say. But, it's some game. But anyway, I now see yellow cars everywhere. So I've kind of got this joke about, but it's the same thing, your brain, when you start, so if you are engaging ideas and thinking about things, the very virtue of that, you do start to attract new ways of being in, which is positive.
Absolutely. That energy exert, so energy out, energy in. So, depending what vibrational frequency you're operating at, that's what's going to come in, to your life a little bit. And, I find I have to be quite careful with that too, because if I'm feeling, worried about things not going to go well, or, something's going to fall apart, then sometimes, that can work against you. But, I think like anybody, we just do what we feel like doing in the day, what fits us, and you just try to make whatever is going on for you at the moment feel good for you. And it really sounds that you have taken that bull by the horns in recognizing when something doesn't feel right and just making a change, and just making a change without necessarily knowing what the end goal is. And I don't want to take those words out of your mouth, but it really sounds like you kind of went, I just need to change. I just need to do something. I'm just going to figure this out and kind of go into the next thing. Has there ever been a grand plan for you, or has that evolved?
Look, I think I am I wouldn't say it's emotional. So I'm calculated in the sense that I've got a bigger, so one of the things I did do a long time, look, I wish now there's all these, I'd say to anyone that's younger that's listening, there are so many great resources everywhere on financial planning. So I think there's this whole thing where when I worked in magazines, and a lot of my girlfriends and I were like, oh my God, like the money we spent on bags or shoes.
Oh, or, I hear that.
Keeping up with the Joneses. But, but it is very true. So I think But quite early on, I inherited a little bit of money from my grandmother, and I chose to go and buy a property. And so I've been quite lucky in the sense that I've been able to be financially secure by a combination of being able to get into the market as well, but not in a house I lived in. So I didn't live in my own house for quite some time, but I just got into the market, and that has always given me, I suppose, just a level of comfort. Yeah. So the grand plan would be that I do financially. I always sort of go, I'm asset rich and cash poor, and I really want to change that this year. I kind of always think like that. But so I do quite often think about things in terms of money, but look, leaving the corporate world was not the smartest financial decision, but it worked out fine. Leaving my husband of 20 years was really financially not, I say to anyone, divorce, really think about it, because it's financially, it's not great for women, but it's been fine. And I also think I've just got this mindset, and I've always had it, that there's opportunity everywhere. So, sure, there might have been better decisions, but we all do the best that we can at the time. And if that means that wasn't the best, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? Like, I can look back and go, I could have done that differently. And I just think that thinking serves no purpose. It doesn't help you. And that's probably what I've learned in the last couple of years, where I've made some decisions. And look, the most recent one obviously is the Lazy Prospector. And seriously, I had Googled, it's quite hilarious. I'd had the vegan company close, and I'd lost a bit of money in it. It's the first time I'd actually really had something that failed. And I was quite shocked that something that, this again sounds so I sound like a complete narcissist, but I was quite shocked that something that I had done had not gone on to the next level. And we had an investor, and the investor pulled out and was wrapped up in COVID and some other issues. Yeah. And so we closed that business. But what that meant was that we could have kept going with it, but I just could see, a bit like I did with the magazines, it was not bringing me a lot of joy. It was actually making me quite sick. And I just thought, this is not where I'm meant to be. And my husband was really amazing. So I had a lot of support. It was, it was like, okay, let's just not attach judgment. But I was going, well, what can I do to make that up? And it was like, you know what, I'll buy a low income, high yield property, Googled. So my planning is so I'm quite intuitively, I'll make intuitive decisions, but I will then quite often go and research. So after I found this cabin and we were just going to put someone in, and then I had this, I've said to you before, just this overwhelming desire after 2020 just to run away. I just really wanted to run away. And I was like, I could run away to that cabin occasionally, but I'm going to have to holiday rent it. So the plan was then, I suppose, after I'd made that decision, I then went and did some back research, and then I realised it was a good decision. So I think I do quite often I think a lot of us do this. We make decisions, and this is going to sound very esoteric, but if we listen to our heart versus our head, because most of my decisions, if I'd listened to my head, I wouldn't have made them. Yeah. But I think I'm a really happy, I'm very happy, and I wasn't always very happy. So I think that there is something about overriding it, and you're going to be afraid. Like it's natural. And yet I look at friends, and they have friends, very dear friends, who have either stayed in marriages that they're not that happy in, or they've stayed in jobs that they really hate, or they've stayed living in a state, like somewhere that they're too afraid to move because it's too hard. And I'm always shocked at that, because it's like, this is not a dress rehearsal. Like, we are all going to be dead somewhere between, I don't know how,
now
30
later.
And so this is it. We've got this is it. And so we owe it to ourselves to find a way, however it is that brings joy. If we're not harming other people, then that's kind of, I just think, our right. And yet I think that we quite often feel guilty about that, or it feels like we're being selfish. And I don't know, I think that where I'm at these days is that, like for me, if I'm happy, then my family's going to be happy, and I'm going to have better relationships, and I'm going to attract more positive things. So I really have got to that point where, yes, to answer your question, I've got kind of a big plan, but in terms of what am I doing? And I said this to you earlier before we press record, but that thing of looking at my bio and going, gosh, I feel like I've had lots of change. And I do think we're going to see that more and more. I think with, Gen Z, for example, and even like with millennials, but I think there's this thing of going, well, why would I want that model of where I go to school, I go to uni, I go into a job, and I'm in that career, and that career's it. And all I'm doing is working to pay off a mortgage. And I know it's cliche. I know what I'm saying is cliche. But unless you're brave enough it is a cliche, and cliches are quite often a cliche because they're real. So, you've really got to dig deep and go, do I want to live my life like that, or am I prepared to be a bit counterculture and choose different things that may not make sense, but I'm going to work towards finding me?
Yeah. I mean, I'm about 3 seconds away from pushing my office chair back and giving you like a standing ovation because preacher. Yes. I couldn't resonate anymore. You talk a little bit about, your constitution and really understanding how to connect from your heart and how it feels versus your head, which might result in a much more, rational or financially smart or life planning smart decision. And, I think that really involves quite a lot of self-development, self-discovery to be able to understand those sorts of things. I know only by research that I operate on a gut feeling more than anything. So, my gut will literally tell me with a resounding yes or no when I'm asked a question. And, that feels like either a grumbly and a funny noise that seems to come out of my mouth, like, oh, no. Or, a strong, kind of gut opening, heart opening yes when something excites me. But only through learning about myself did I recognize that. Did you have a period of time where you invested in getting to know yourself? And what did that look like? What resources did you lean on?
Yeah, look, so one of the things that people don't talk about is mental health and therapy. So I have done from in my early 20s, I had a struggle with some depression which is really linked to the anxiety. It's just hasn't been an issue for decades, but it was back then. And so I had some therapy back then. I did some cognitive behavioural therapy. I also, when I left Vogue, I went and did a couple of courses. I did a course in Buddhism, and I'm not Buddhist, I'm actually not religious at all, but I was fascinated with it as a psychology because it reminded me a lot of the cognitive behavioural therapy. And really what that's about is you look at something and with a fixed mindset, we will just make the assumption that that's true. And, I think what's really beneficial always is to go, okay, well, I'm going to, how does that make me feel? Not great. Okay, well, let's look at it another way. Let's look at it another way. And it's just like that helicopter view. And I hadn't done anything for years, maybe decades actually, in terms of, I've done courses, and I suppose I've been lucky that I've got a lot of friends that are, I suppose, I wouldn't say they're spiritual, but, they're smart, smart women. But in 2020, my daughter's best friend committed suicide, and that with the closing of the business and then the knock-on effect of what that meant for our family was massive. It was so massive, and I decided to go back and see a therapist as much as anything to be able to support my daughter in her grief. And I realised just some of the parallels with us, and so that has been, and look, at the time my therapist back then was like, you just need to, going back when someone else said stop everything, and I just couldn't fathom it. She was like, you just need to stop. And, because I had this on and that on and blah, blah, blah. And it has been, I probably only saw her maybe 6 to 10 times, but it was so profound. She was so brilliant. Most of it was over Zoom, which was kind of a bit weird. I did have one face-to-face session with her, and then I just remember looking down at my toes and noticed I had chip nail polish, and then I got it kind of distracted me. I was like, I'm just going to go back to Zoom. I'm really comfortable with Zoom. But yeah, so from that point of view, that course, just doing that, talking with her, every couple of weeks for an hour has been so brilliant, so brilliant in terms of me reassessing how I spend my time, the people I let into my life, and whether you get a gurney on my team. I think that, and this as well, when you give a lot, quite often people will take a lot, and you don't always know that at the time until you find yourself really exhausted. And so I've really had to kind of reassess, and look, not that many people have kind of gone from my life, but I think some friendships just weren't serving me. Yeah. And so that was and also some decisions, like just, that whole thing with the vegan company, like the decision was made to close it, but I was really had this sense of failure. And I think what she helped me do was just completely reframe it. And you do read this. You read this about entrepreneurs that, you can choose to see it as a failure, or you can choose to see it as an opportunity for what you're doing next. Like, what learnings did I take from it? And there were so many learnings from that particular failure. So in some ways, that's probably what I've done. I mean, obviously I have gone and done meditation courses, and I went back to yoga for the first time. Oh my God, like I was like the middle-aged stiff tumbleada up the back that couldn't do anything.
I actually relate. I might be a teacher, but I couldn't tell you the last time I actually practiced. When you're in the trenches, sometimes there's no time to stretch.
But it's so good for you. So I think that thing for me, I think for us that suicide was just such a massive shake-up. Also for me, because what I've realised is that I moved away from the whole corporate life to also be a better mum and to spend more time. And as I said, my busy self turns up. So I think that I've really carved out time in the last 18 months. It's been a year since that happened, a little bit over a year. So I'm just a lot more conscious of like how I spend my time, who I give my time to. And the big thing for me is just learning to say no to things. And I find that really hard. And you probably do too. I think it's just in our makeup that lots of opportunities always seem to spring up. And because I think I always overestimate how much time I've got, or how I think things will take less time than they do. So I think that's but no, I don't. I said to a friend, the same friend that I walked on the beach with all those years ago, we speak, and she's in the UK, and I said, I can't believe I'm still dealing with this stuff all these years later. And she's like, yeah, but isn't that all of us? Like, this is kind of what happens.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, actually, you're right. We just get a bit better at it, and it gets a bit easier. So, I've got this great thing that my therapist said very early on about saying no, like actually saying no to carve out time for me. And I said, I just feel it's so uncomfortable. I don't. And she said, yeah, it's just like carrying around a big bag of potatoes. And she said, it's really uncomfortable. And at a certain point, you get stronger. That doesn't feel so heavy anymore. And every time when I have this thing where I have to say no, or I'm like, it's that bag of potatoes again. Yeah. So
it's funny, the things that stay with you, isn't it, that really help in those moments to offer just a sense of pause before barreling into something, or, making a decision. Sometimes our brains aren't our best friends when it comes to making a decision, and the instant reaction, the instant response is actually the one that's not the best for us. But, taking that pause to think about things like the sack of potatoes, or just to have a breath and see how does this actually feel in my gut or in my heart is, really profound. And I think it's a learned skill, and, investing in that time to understand what it feels like for you is a great thing. And I couldn't be a bigger advocate for therapy. It is just, my partner's training right now to be a psychologist. He's had his own life change, do-over as such, and is back in school as an adult learning to be a psychologist. And, I'm pretty grateful because I get in-house therapy, which is great.
So good.
He's very good at it too.
Well, I think the stigma of it's gone, and I hope it has in some, maybe not so much in the corporate world, I don't know, but like when I'm always saying to my friends now, honestly, just go and get some therapy. Just go, look, because you'll sort it out really quickly, whatever it is that's going on for you that's not working. You just get from A to Z rather than wasting 12 months of your life, because we're as humans, we're like, we get into these habits. And like I was saying before with these friends that, they either won't leave the marriage or they won't. And I'm not saying that people should leave a marriage, but if you're unhappy. So I'm continually surprised by people that are unhappy, that are so afraid of change. And it's why I admire what you did so much in that sense of, not dissimilar to me. You had this job that was very attractive, and, just that thing of going, this isn't right, and I'm going to make a move, and I don't really know where I'm going or how I'm going to do it, but I just know that. And most of us land on our feet. I think that's what we forget, because we wouldn't have been in those jobs being successful if we were going to end up in a gutter. I mean, you know what I mean? So it's
exactly. It's so true. And I think we're primed for comfort a lot of the times too, you know, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, because it is, you know, it is scary. It is a challenge to go and do something new and to do something unknown, you know, leaving a relationship that doesn't work. You know, what else is out there? You know, leaving a job, what else is out there? It is scary. You know, but we're pretty primed to do scary things these days. I think we've got a lot of resources, and you know, us as individuals, our brains, our bodies are designed to see challenge and to grow and to do new things. And you know, I think what you're doing is incredibly inspiring and exciting, and you know, it's a good message that should be heard loud and clear out there. I want to touch back onto the Lazy Prospector, because that is your new venture and your new, in some ways, I guess, scary thing, you know, going into the unknown of starting this beautiful place to stay in an incredible part of the world. So you bought that block on I'm going to say a bit of a whim, but it's like the wrong word, but it's, you know, a bit of an instinct to go and do it. And you know, what happens next?
Well, and it was a whim in the sense that, like I said, I was looking for something that was high yield, low entry, but we did buy it sight unseen. It didn't have a bathroom. I didn't even tell my husband that, actually. So we were like, you know, when we first went there, and then we were doing this crazy Gumtree run, picking up stuff across Tasmania. He won't even go back, actually. He said I broke him on that trip. And, so, look, it's been tricky because of COVID, because it would have been open probably 6 months ago. So that has been such a lesson in patience. I had a lot of people saying, I'll just send a stylist in and get it set up. And I think for me, we were fortunate enough that we could afford to sit it out. And so it really is, yes, it's a business, but it's as much as anything like a passion project. And it, without wanting to get too heavy, it was born out of the failure of the business closing, coupled with the suicide. So there's quite dark. Now I look back and go, gosh, it's so obvious in hindsight that I was just wanting to escape. And I just saw this cabin and just that was that. So it was a bit of a whim in that sense, because I even changed the game plan of, let's just put a tenant in and et cetera. But I'm excited because I, as you know, I signed up. So I had no idea about running an Airbnb, and it's not, honestly, I don't even know if I'll like the business of running an Airbnb. It will be interesting to see because, you know, I think I've loved the creative process of it. So we'll see how that part of it goes. But my ex-husband, he has an Airbnb, and I didn't actually want to go and ask him for help with that. We already run the other business. So I remember Googling, you know, how to run an Airbnb, what's involved. And then I stumbled across Sarah Andrews from Captain's Rest, her course, the hosting masterclass. And, you know, look, so although I've done development stuff, I've never been one necessarily to do courses, interestingly enough. And now that I've done this, I don't know why I've not done more, because it was so unreal. And, you know, I signed up for the online, and I was even surprised at how much money I would never have. If someone told me I was going to do that, I would have gone, you're crazy. No. And I'm so happy I did. And then from there I did the Zoom, and this it just connected me with this community. And look, I'd come out of obviously doing things like Meat Free Week. It's a more animal activist stuff. And, you know, they're pretty hardcore. Like it's, you know, it's, and again, probably not great for my constitution. Like I really am about animal rights and that sort of stuff, but it's quite a hard space to play in emotionally. And so I suddenly moved into this world of these women where, you know, I could have a whole lot of drama going on at home with the girls fighting or, you know, whatever. I could then jump on with this group and talk. This is going to sound so vacuous, but, you know, we could talk about linen and,
that's beautiful. You know, it's fun.
I discovered new. And you know what? The best thing about it creatively is that I had, like, I live like you. I live in the Northern Rivers in a small town on 5 acres with my family and ducks and chickens and my pig, and, you know, and it's quite, you know, you think that I would be very much into the whole, because of the Byron thing, very much into handmade, and somehow along the years I'd become quite practical. So I'd moved into a more practical way of being, you know, right down to, you know, Kmart plates. Do you know what I mean? So things that really, you know, truthfully, which, and I think it was practical because I've got children. And so I always wanted things that's, like, I've got lots of artwork, but kind of everyday things, I become quite practical. And I just feel like I'd lost that creative part of myself somewhere along the line. And the course doing the Lazy Prospector, the women that I've connected with, yourself included, have just reminded me of this whole other beautiful world out there of, you know, it's okay just to be wanting to put to do things that are beautiful for the world, because if the world needs anything, it's probably goodness. It is beauty, it's kindness, it's compassion. And I think anything that's made, any person that's doing that, whether it's through photography, whether it's like you with your beautiful ceramics and your plant-based food and wanting to do a book, and all of those things are so what we need right now, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And it's, you know, when people live their own truth and, you know, enjoy their own expression of creativity, it can only be a good thing, because it gives a lot of permission to other people to be able to step into theirs. You know, it be choosing linens and talking about linens. I mean, sign me up. Linen's one of my favorite topics, apart from ceramics, naturally. Linen is one of my favorite topics, let alone botanicals and everything else. So, you know, there is nothing wrong with enjoying that side of things, and that expression is what people will feel when they come into the Lazy Prospector. Where did that name come from, by the way?
So I've got this great friend, Kate Duthie, who she works for the World Nomads, and she's an editor, and she and her family. So with Kate and Rob and the children are up, and I think I was really tapping in. So obviously with Sarah's course, there's a lot about just talking about, you know, building your story and your brand. And I had sort of tapped more into the mining history of the town Zion on the West Coast. And yet, you know, obviously I don't really relate to mining so I, you know, and then I was off on this whole weird trip. Honestly, I had so many, I must have had like 500 really actually pretty bad names. And so Kate, I actually took the girls down the street to the corner store to get something, and I came back and she's like, I've got it. And so it was actually her name. It's she was working with a whole lot of different things I'd had, and I'd had, I don't think I'd had the word lazy there. I'd had the word prospector there. And I'd had, you know, Aragon's quarters. I had all this, you know, the silver nickel. I don't know. I had all these weird, like, you know, I don't know. Maybe they ordered voyage. I don't know. But it just felt really right, because for me, like, I think that if you go to the West Coast, as we've discussed, it's so incredible. It's on the edge of the Tarkine. There's so much to do from an adventure point of view. But for someone like me, I love the idea of doing that, and I'm sure I will do some of it. But I'm also just about wanting to go there and just chill and, you know, just be. Yeah. And so I think it is that thing where you can kind of slow down and do more. And or if you're out there climbing those mountains, or, you know, kayaking or doing whatever you're doing, then it's like a little bowl hole that you can come back to, and it's just that's the bit where you can be lazy. So you can be out there doing your prospecting. So that's so it has but look, that cabin has come so easily. It's probably like, you know, when you think about you with your ceramics, there are just some things, everything, and obviously working in magazines for so long, and then obviously with Meat Free Week and Vegan Company, like, I feel quite comfortable in that branding space. So everything for me with that as a, like, if what is this brand, I don't know, I just, maybe because it has been so intuitive, like the whole process. So I just feel really clear about it and what it is, and nothing about it other than the border closures and not being able to get down there. So it's been easy, and it is that thing I do, and it's been fun. So I felt like I needed some fun after 2020, so it has been really fun.
Oh, that's so nice. And, you know, Lord, do we need some fun? That sounds amazing. And, you know, just in talking to you today, and, you know, that thinking about the sides of yourself that you have married together as well, that desire to be really connected to what you're doing, but also the desire to create exciting things and do exciting things and forever evolve yourself. You know, the words, the Lazy Prospector, working together, feel like a real, you know, coming together of all of the sides of yourself and an expression. So I cannot wait to see when those doors open. I'm assuming there's going to be a bathroom by the time we get there, which is exciting. I think it's opening, what did you say? I think I saw it on Instagram, the 2nd of February.
So I did this really weird, I've got this weird thing about numbers, and I don't even know I'm not even into numbers like that, but I've just picked the 2nd of the 2nd of the 22nd. So it's 0202 2022. And I just love all those twos. I just thought, that's a really cool number.
We're going to do some Googling after this about, numerology and numbers. I hear you. I've got 1111 tattooed on my wrist for a number of reasons, which we can go into at another stage. So symmetry, numbers, all of that sort of stuff, just it gets me going. I love that. So it's a perfect day.
Well, you'll appreciate this. It's just after the new moon in Aquarius as well. So my friend's an astrologer, so I'm kind of all about, she does all this new moon stuff. So I'm all about new moon intentions and
beautiful. Yeah, setting that intention to have somewhere beautiful to escape to in all of the right ways, which is awesome. So we are coming to the end of our time. So I want to make sure that listeners get on and follow you at the Lazy Prospector, which I'll make sure that I put the link to that in the show notes. But is there any other way that we can support you in your endeavours and what you're doing in the world?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm all good. I don't know what next year will bring. Like, I think that the Lazy Prospector will open and that will do its thing. And I think for me, I will definitely be wanting to do new things next year. But I just, probably a bit like you, I've got ideas, but nothing's cemented. So I'm just going to, I feel that this year, I say this every year actually, I'm always like, oh, I'm so excited about the new year. And then the last 2 years, it was like, oh, I'm still processing.
Yeah.
I genuinely feel excited about next year. So no, it would be great. Yeah, it would be great to get a follow and we'll just, nothing really. I can't think of anything, but thank you for asking.
Oh, no, it's perfect. I think the only other thing I could say that we could do is just acknowledge and appreciate your generosity of spirit in sharing your story today so openly and, take that on board and do maybe a little bit more of that ourselves, just honoring if there's something that doesn't feel right, taking the time, the energy to take a look at it, trying new things, not being afraid to fail. I think what you've shared today is so wonderful and will offer a lot of people a little bit of a guide that things can be perfectly okay, if not 1,000 times better when you jump off that cliff. So thank you so much.
That's fine. I will just say that thing about failure. It is so true. It's all about reframing. And I think we get so stuck in fear. And if you overthink it, like if you think too much and if you think too hard, if you're having to think that much about it, then I would say you already the answer, which is you're in the wrong place, you're in the wrong. And so I do. And I think that I know it's again very cliche, but that thing of, I know that when I get to the end of my life, I won't be wondering. Like, I won't be wondering if I'm sure I'll be thinking I could have made some better decisions, but I won't be wondering. So
that's wonderful. It's a beautiful way to live and it's a beautiful thing to share. So thank you so much for taking the time today out of your day, especially this time of the year. We're recording in December and it's chaos. And I'm just so grateful to you to be spending the time, to be supporting me as well on this endeavor and just being such a wonderful set of ears, the typing, the DMs, all that stuff. You've been a wonderful support. And so thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much. And I really hope this podcast does really well. I suspect it will.
Oh, I hope so too. I'm crossing all my fingers and all my toes. But, you just do things and you put it out there. If it helps one person, I'm like so chuffed. But I so appreciate you. Thank you. And all the details will be in the show notes. But thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me.
See ya. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the stories of starting over with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you liked the episode and are keen to hear more, please hit the follow button and leave a review. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram at Unemployed and Afraid, where there's more goodies and links to today's show notes. See you there.